Hello and welcome back to the port. I'm the Gav Measure, and this is a review of the Russian Tech Tree Tier 6 alternative cruiser, the Tallinn. Now, this is a game of domination on two brothers, a Tier 5 and 6 game. On the team with a Gadamada, an Aoba, a York, Charlemagne, Indianapolis, Gneisenau division, Bayern, Queens and Elizabeth, and a New Mexico. Spawn on the left flank, so we're just gonna see what we can do, I guess you could say. So the Tallinn, she's based on an Admiral Hipper class cruiser hull. In fact, she's based on the hull of the Lutzow, which was the fifth and final member of the Admiral Hipper class cruisers, which was laid down in 1937 and launched in 1939. However, with war against France and Great Britain happening at the time, Germany decided that it wasn't really in their interest to waste resources completing this cruiser, considering that it was intended that the war would be a short war, and therefore the long lead time of completing a cruiser was something they weren't necessarily interested in doing. So in February 1940, with there still being peace between Germany and Russia, it was decided by Germany to sell the cruiser to Russia, who was looking for one at the time. Now, what was sold to Russia was simply the hull with A and B turret fitted and about half of the superstructure fitted, and that was about all. She was towed to Leningrad, where she was intended to be finished. However, with war between Germany and Russia breaking out, Russia didn't really have the opportunity to complete the cruiser, and with the siege of Leningrad, again, resources were pretty restricted. However, this is the envisaged completion of the cruiser, potentially post-war, judging by some of the secondary turrets and things which have appeared to have like radar modules fitted. So this is probably a 1950s version of the ship had it been completed post-war, hence why it's called the Tallinn and not the Petropavlovsk, I believe would be the name that the Russians gave the hull. Anyway, so in comparison to the Tech Tree Tier 6 cruisers, what are we looking at? Well, when it comes to survivability, she has the third highest HP of 36,000. She also has the second lowest torpedo reduction of only 7%. When it comes to the armour scheme, it's always best to go back to the port and take a look at the armour scheme there. So welcome back to board, taking a look at the armour scheme of the Tallinn. Well, first of all, let's start off with that superstructure. It's mostly 13mm of plating. It's big and it's half tooled by high explosive and small caliber AP, along with AP overpens. Not really much more to add there. Some parts of it are more thickly armoured, however those parts are few and far between. Moving on, let's start off with the proper armour, and that being, let's go with the bow. So the upper belt of the bow and the deck of the bow are both 25mm thick, which means they can ricochet AP of calibers 14-inch and below, which does mean that this ship is going to be very effective at bow tanking against 14-inch gun battleships. So she's top tier in the game. She should do alright. However, she's bottom tier in the game. She's going to suffer pretty much as per every other tier 6 cruiser. However, she does have a lower armoured belt, an icebreaker I guess you could say, of 40mm thick. However, it's quite low in the water. I wouldn't necessarily want to rely on it at all times, but it is nice to have. I guess it's worth mentioning. When it comes to the stern, we're looking at practically the same story. We have 25mm main armoured belt and deck armour, and we do have a bit of 40mm down below as a kind of rear icebreaker maybe, but again I wouldn't really want to rely on it. So generally I'd say the bow and the stern 25mm all over, capable of ricocheting 14-inch AP when angled. Torpedo bulge. Now this is obviously all below the waterline, but there is part of it which does creep up above the waterline and covers your lower armoured bow. That's 25mm thick, so again that means generally when angled you can ricochet those 14-inch AP shells. Now let's move on to the rest of the armoured belt and the deck armour. So deck armour is 27mm, which is capable of ricocheting 15-inch AP. So an interesting trait maybe, very much like the British heavy cruisers. Wouldn't necessarily want to rely upon it, but it is nice when it does happen, I guess you could say. You have a upper armoured belt of 25mm and a lower armoured belt of 80mm, so your upper armoured belt can ricochet 14-inch AP, whereas your lower armoured belt can practically ricochet anything, as long as it's all angled. If you're broadside on, obviously you're offering this nice thick slab of steel, which will arm those AP shells as they punch through. However, when angled, you do have a kind of reasonable chance. So against, say, 15, 16, 18-inch guns, you're going to try and kite, try and dodge. However, if you have to, worst case scenario, maybe do a bit of angling. But I wouldn't necessarily rely upon it, would be the best way to put it. It's worth noting that she does have a bit of a turtle back armor scheme, which is quite interesting, which means at close range, cruisers which are trying to shoot in might end up ricocheting off that internal turtle back and not penetrating your citadel, so potentially you might be a bit more survivable up close. However, I wouldn't necessarily want to try and rely upon that against high caliber armor piercing shells. Taking a look at the turrets and the barbettes, these are covered in 50 to 80mm plating all over, generally quite resistant to practically anything and everything, and obviously when angled, but they are quite boxy turrets, so it does mean that you'll probably be offering a flat size to at least something at all times. Furthermore, they are resistant to high explosive shells of an 8-inch caliber and less, so it does mean they are a bit more survivable than, say, some other turrets that we see on some other ships. When it comes to the Citadel, as we've already mentioned, it has got that turtle back armour, which you can see there. This means that at close range, if something does penetrate your outer armour belt, there's a chance that it will ricochet off this turtle back and not hit your Citadel, or not actually enter your Citadel. However, at long range, you will be offering this flat piece of steel to plunging shells, which means at long range, it might not be as survivable as, well, I guess it's better than not having any armour at all, but it just does mean it's not going to be as effective. It's not angled effectively, I guess you could say. Now, you do have a top of 30mm, and the turtle back sides are 40mm. You do have 25mm to 80mm ends, obviously with the 80mm at the top and the 25mm lower down. Generally, the Citadel is quite long. As to whether or not it's above the waterline, it's very hard to say. I would say if it is above the waterline, it's only incredibly marginally, really, is the best way to put it. All in all, the armour scheme of the Tallinn generally would appear to be one of the strongest armour schemes for tier 6 cruisers, especially for the tech tree ones. When you include, say, some of the premiums, I still think she's very survivable. Obviously, the Cheshire does have the armoured belt, which can resist 15-inch AP. However, Cheshire is very much in a league of her own, really. Armour scheme-wise, probably very comparable to the Charlemagne, but does have a thicker deck armour, which is quite nice, so quite survivable. I would interpret it to be. Anyway, let's get back to the game. Well, welcome back. So, let's talk about artillery. Well, she has 12 number 7-inch guns mounted in 4 triple gun turrets. We have A turret with B turret super firing up front, and then we have Y turret with X turret super firing at the rear. Now, she has the longest range at the tier for a tech tree cruiser of 15.4 kilometers. But she does have the joint second slowest reload of 14 seconds. She has the third fastest turret traverse, however, of 22.5 seconds per 180 degrees of rotation. When it comes to those shells and their hitting qualities, you are looking at having the second lowest HG shell damage of 2,500, along with the lowest fire chance of only 11%. You do have the fourth highest AP damage per shell, which is 4,650. Apologies, I got lost in my notes there. When it comes to combining that all and looking at the DPM, what are we looking at? Well, you have the fourth highest HE DPM, third lowest fires per minute, and also the fourth highest AB DPM. Because the manoeuvrability of this cruiser, I'm having to take the long way around. We'll talk about that when we get there. Torpedoes wise, you have 2 quintuplet launchers, that's basically 5 tubes per launcher mounted, 1 per side. Angle's pretty good, however that's about as far as the good stuff goes when it comes to these torpedoes. You do have the slowest reload per launcher, which is 131 seconds, and you still retain an above average reload time per tube of those launchers. Now you do have an average damage of 15,100, but you have a really short range of 4 kilometers. They also do have a very large detectability of 1.4 kilometers. However, when you're within 4 kilometers of someone, they know you're firing torpedoes, so it doesn't really necessarily matter too much about the detectability of the torpedoes. Now the torpedoes are really fast. In fact, they are the fastest at 70 knots, so they will be crossing those 4 kilometers very quickly. When it comes to manoeuvrability, it's certainly not an area where the Tallinn has a feather in her cap, I'll have to confess. She is the third fastest, good news, at 33 knots, but she does have the joint largest turning circle of 900 metres. It's worth noting that HMS Hood, the Tier 6 British premium battleship, has a turning circle of 910 metres, so you're only 10 metres better than the largest warship built by the Royal Navy in 1920. Now she does have the fourth slowest rudder shift as well, 10.9 seconds, so which does mean that with her turning circle and her rudder shift, she doesn't necessarily suit a kitey build unless you go all in on it. But even with like a 4.8 second rudder shift that I have here at the moment, due to that very large turning circle, she is a bit clumsy in the water, I guess you could say. When it comes to the concealment, you are the second worst by sea at 13.4 kilometers. You have a detectability of 8 kilometers by air and 7.3 kilometers when firing smoke. When it comes to the consumables, as you can see on the bottom left, she has sonar and radar. She gets 2 charges of sonar, and this is your typical Tier 6 cruiser sonar, which will be able to detect ships at 4.2 kilometers, detect torpedoes at 3 kilometers, and has a 94-second duration along with a 180-second reload. When it comes to the radar, she has a Russian-style radar, so this has a range of 9 kilometers, 15-second duration, and a 180-second reload. Now, her sonar can be traded out. You can take defensive AA fire consumable instead. However, I wouldn't necessarily advise this. Reason being is, at the moment, carriers seem to be few and far between, at least they have been during the time of this review, and also a defensive AA fire consumable is only useful in games when there's carriers, whereas sonar is useful in all games. So generally at the moment I kind of feel it's better to take sonar rather than defensive AA fire consumable. Now, as always, down in the description will be the command build and the modules used during this review. In regards to modules, pretty standard stuff, I guess you could say. I've taken Aim Assistance Module 1, Steering Gears Module 2, and Module 3. When it comes to the commander build, things I've focused on have been reload. I've been able to bring that reload down to, let's have a look. I've just got to fire one of these guns, just to have a look, haven't I? 12 seconds. So I brought it down from 14 seconds. Okay, that's not a massive saving, but it is a saving at least, which will obviously improve all my DPMs, my fires per minute, and things like that. Well, generally the Tallinn, she seems to be quite survivable due to her armour scheme. Her damage potential can feel a little bit lackluster at times, but that's really due to her reload time. And then when it comes to her manoeuvrability, that rudder shift and turn circle can be quite painful, but her speed is quite nice. Torpedoes, generally it's a case of what torpedoes, you rarely ever use them unless you're getting really close. And concealment wise, obviously it's not a feather in her cap. She obviously has her good sides and her downsides, as per pretty much any cruiser, but she does seem to be quite capable for her tier. Now, the reason why I'm going around this side of the island is because if I go this side of the island and get spotted, I don't want to not have the ability to turn away if I need to. So I'm just taking this side of the island as a slight precaution, but after I've taken this side of the island, I will be heading in towards Bravo. As a radar cruiser, it's quite nice considering her survivability and the range of that radar, I should say. However, the duration's quite short, so it's going to be more of a quick spot kind of a situation rather than actually a persistent damage dealing. And when you consider it's only a 15-second duration and your base reload is 14 seconds, you're generally going to get one maybe 2 if you're quick on the draw in regards to volleys against an enemy target. Gun accuracy on this ship does seem to be quite nice. The shells generally seem to land where you aim them, which obviously is to her advantage considering that slow reload. It does mean that generally you can make more use of that DPM. Now, strangely, the enemy team have all gone down the middle rather than continuing playing merry-go-round, so we are closing in on Bravo without any form of resistance, which at the moment obviously may be detrimental to our team, because obviously we've got ships all over the map. However, what that does mean is it's going to be very easy to almost pin the enemy in, because they've all just trapped themselves in a very tight situation, I guess you could say. Potentially I might even use my radar as I come around the corner in order to see what's going on. There's the Indianapolis, yeah, so they're pretty much, this is like shooting fish in a barrel for our team. The enemy's pinned off at one end, and me and this Fuso, I guess you could say, are going to be closing up the other end of the trap, and all that's going to be left on the enemy team is a Gneisenau. Considering it's a Gneisenau which does have torpedoes, I will just chuck my sonar on now to protect me and the friendly battleship. I will turn in. Now, Gneisenau does have 15-inch guns, which obviously will hurt. Thankfully, she's looking the other way, so we're just going to take advantage of this situation. No, there we go. Shooting fish in a barrel. Might as well close in, keep the pressure on the enemy, I guess. A bit risky considering my armor scheme is only really effective against 14-inch guns, but then I guess I can get away with it as long as the enemy don't necessarily shoot at me. We seem to be getting away with it most well indeed. And that should be the Gneisenau. Oh no. Going to switch to AP. God only knows if we'll be able to make the final touch on the Gneisenau, you never know. And there she goes. All in all, Tallinn seems to be quite a good cruiser for Tier 6. Quite interesting. The armour scheme certainly does make it quite interesting. Obviously, her only detriments can be her manoeuvrability, concealment, torpedoes, and that reload, I guess you could say. But if you can work around them, she can be quite nice. For only 48,000 damage from 93 hits on target, somehow managed to detect a single ship, getting 4 defender ribbons and setting 5 fires. Mostly working in HE that game, because we were just playing a bit of the long game, I guess you could say, and there wasn't really any opportunities that I certainly noticed where I could have switched AP, but I guess some of you may be able to pick up those moments, but it's one of those amusing moments, I guess you could say. Tallinn getting me a 6 from my team, which isn't too bad. Our team seems to do very well indeed. We managed to wrap up our flank, and it was kind of then to wrap up the rest of the map. And I guess because I took the go round the other side of the map and seal the other side, it meant I kind of took myself out of the engagement for a lot of it, which meant other people were able to take more advantage of the enemy closing in on the trap. Economy wise, walking away with a profit of 61,000 credits with a premium account and a common credit booster, and would have probably made a loss of about 10,000 credits if it wasn't for the credit booster and the premium account. So again, just kind of showing, this is why I usually always use a common credit booster at tier 6, a epic credit booster at tier 7, and a rare credit booster at legendary tier. It's just one way to try and guarantee always making a profit, I guess you could say. Well, I kind of feel like I deserve that kind of a place on the end table for that kind of performance, but I certainly have had better games. I think it's just the luck of the draw. Although, thankfully, by it being an easy game like this, it has meant that I've been able to read through the review notes without getting distracted or anything like that. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Down in the description is the command build and the modules, link to Patreon, and email address for the channel if you want to send in any of your own video game captures. Until next time, I'm the Gareth Major, and back to the ball.
Hey, hey, clear the way, here comes the galloping Major. Bumpity, 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 bump. Get out of the way there, you fellas, and Demolition won't live to run you down.